I really feel blessed. रवि सर के पीछे तो मैं शायद 1 साल से पड़ी हूँ कि सर हमारे स्कूल में बोलिए।
नवीन भाई कहाँ चले गए?
हाँ, उनका वीडियो का कुछ प्रॉब्लम हो रहा है। ज्वाइनिंग अगेन। हाँ मोनिका मेरे नाम से ज्वाइन कर रहे हैं नवीन सर एडमिन। हाँ, रीनेम करना पड़ेगा उनको। हाँ,
Ma'am,
तो
I'm not
जी
the co-host. It is Diksha.
हाँ, he's on,
हाँ,
नवीन.
I made you co-host, Yasmin. Are you co-host now?
Ravi sir is.
हाँ, रवि सर को
Also,
बना दिया।
also, yes, also me.
हाँ, so we are live and I'm going to start in 15 seconds, let's say 5:05 sharp. Yes, and Monica, you are going to take the responsibility of letting people in. Okay. And request all participants to please put their correct names in the joining link, because otherwise, if people are joining with my name, there will be many Mansi names in the link, and we may risk other people or trolls or some bugs to enter. So we have to protect the conversation from these things. So please write your correct name. All participants are encouraged and requested to put their correct names. If you are getting a different name in the joining link, please change your name. Please rename it. That's extremely important for us. This is a request for all of the participants other than speakers to please put your correct name in the participants. If you see that your name is not correct as displayed on your screen, please change your name. You can go to the participants, then right click and put your right name to watch. So
I think everybody's got their correct names.
okay. Warm greetings. On behalf of the Wednesdays for Water, an initiative of the W4W Foundation, a think tank instituted as Citizens Collective, we welcome you to the 109th session of Wednesdays for Water. And today's session is going to be on Himalayan waters with focus on development and disaster that comes around it. The objective of the Wednesdays for Water is to engage in conversation with water experts, grassroots practitioners, policymakers, scientists, academicians, and youth to explore the complex intertwined issues associated with water and the possible solutions that these people are engaging and even finding opportunities and challenges through them. It has expanded since then. We started Wednesdays for Water in April 2021. And we have been doing more activities like the Friday Waters, which has water talkies, book reading club, thesis club, water arts. And then we also do Monday Munching to acknowledge and appreciate the women for water. Besides organizing physical activities like water workshops, walk and talk, seminars, special courses, conference panels, to continue the water conversation, which we strongly believe that water conversations are extremely crucial for water conservation. So we are trying to do it in various ways, and the idea is to create a knowledge bank around water, which will be open access. Do visit our website, www.w4w.in, for more details. So coming to today's session, as I mentioned, today we are going to talk and focus more on the Himalayan region, or water of the Himalayan region. And the significance is beyond the natural beauty of Himalayas. Because whenever we talk about Himalayas, we only imagine the mountains and the snow, and we often forget that there are many rivers which are originating from there, and they play a critical role. And if we even talk about, let's say, only Ganga, which itself is a major water resource of the country, apart from it being kind of a holy entity for the entire country. But when we talk about these things, we are often very much in the intangible art part of it. But today we want to also look at the tangible side of it, where both the development has been taken with open arms by the government, by the people, by the society, and that has also been complemented, or let's say has brought many conflicts around disasters which are accompanying the development. So to do the discussion around this many aspects of Himalayan waters, we have two very well-known people who have been engaging with water matters for a long time in their career. And we have Ravi Chopra sir and Naveen Juyal sir as our speakers, and myself, Mansi Bal Bhargav, who will be the moderator of the session and also who conceptualize these water conversations. To continue this conversation today, we also have many of our fellows, because this is a series which is going to be run as a collaborative effort of CGAP, with which W4W is doing a project on plastic pollution in Ganga, where we are trying to work on tracking and tackling of plastic pollution in the Ganga basin. So CGAP is kind of supporting and sponsoring this series, which we have promised to run for 12 sessions in 12 months of the year. And today is the first session because I am also the lead researcher of the project for them. And in the next 11 sessions, our 11 women scholars who are working on the project, they are going to moderate the sessions for us. So let me invite Dr. Naveen Juyal and Dr. Ravi Chopra sir to talk about a little bit more on Himalayan waters. And we are really privileged to have them because I have been actually after Ravi Chopra sir for quite some time to speak on it. He is a research scientist at People's Science Institute, and which is a pioneering non-for-profit organization. And he was the director of institute for a long time, 1998 to 2014. He is quite a senior researcher as well as activist, I must say, policy advisor, many things which he wears hats. And his interactions between technology and society on environment and development is very well known in the sector. And he's actually also produced the first citizens report on the state of India's environment in 1982. And later his analysis of India's water requirements has been instrumental in looking at the way we actually decide about water matters in the country. His current research focuses on regeneration of Himalayan springs. So let me first invite Dr. Chopra to talk about it, and then I will move on to Naveen sir and introduce him when he is speaking. Over to you, Ravi sir, and we are really privileged to have you.
Thank you, Mansi. Before I get into the topic of the day, I want to first of all say that what we call development should be understood as economic growth. Development is a much wider term. This is only economic growth. Secondly, I want to clarify that there are three important categories of Himalayan rivers to my mind. Two of them are well known and reasonably well understood. Some rivers are perennial, they are glacier fed. Other rivers are rain fed and may or may not be perennial. But very important from the disaster point of view, and this is something for which I have to thank my co-speaker, Naveen, are the small Himalayan streams. These streams are often non-perennial, they're seasonal. But even when they are perennial, they don't carry too much water. They are small because they are close to the origin. They come down steep slopes. And during the rainy season, they are easily flooded. So the flooded river coming down a steep slope brings along with it a lot of sediments, and in the process acquires a tremendous amount of erosive force and can cause a lot of damage once they reach down the slope. Okay, please keep that in mind. Now, in terms of economic growth, the first onslaught that affected the entire Himalayan environment and also our rivers was deforestation. Deforestation led to a reduction in the recharging of year-round recharging of the streams and the rivers, and curtailed to some extent the base flows that come in the non-rainy months. Okay. The second major onslaught was that of dams construction. And dams construction, though it has a longish history, going back probably almost 100 years, the major dams arrived only in the 1970s and 80s. I will leave the issue of dams and their impacts to Dr. Juyal. Only make one comment that dams have a life cycle impact. Pre-construction phase, construction, and commission, when you commission dams and when you decommission them. In every phase, they have negative environmental impacts. The next economic growth onslaught you can take is over extraction of water. Water has been extracted from our smaller rivers and mainly for irrigation purposes, as well as after the 70s for drinking water supply to nearby habitations. Okay. And there are a number of rain-fed rivers which are in rain shadows. For example, in the state of Uttarakhand, there is a river called Kosi, which supplies water to Almora town and then later to Ramnagar. Now, this river lies in a rain shadow in an area where the annual rainfall may be around 36 inches to 40 inches. 40 inches is about 100, is about a meter. So that's a relatively low rainfall for our mountain areas. And it carries very little water during the year. There are increasingly, I find when I travel up the Kosi Valley, I find that in some stretches, it is reduced to puddles in these non-rainy months. That gives you an idea of how much water is extracted from this river. The road construction. Road construction, particularly while the roads are being, while the slopes are being cut to make the roads, at that time, there's a lot of muck is just directly dumped into our rivers. Nobody pays any attention to the rules and regulations for muck management. And instead, it's very convenient to throw the muck directly into the river. When the muck goes into the river, two things happen. First, it affects the entire ecology of the river. The river being an ecosystem, there are all kinds of life forms that survive on the bed of the river, that survive in the water, that survive on the banks, and if there was a floodplain, on the floodplains. The organisms that are on the bed or in the water, they get affected very strongly because they lose sunlight. And for many of these organisms, sunlight along with oxygen is the source of life. Secondly, when we dump a lot of sediments into the riverbed, then the riverbed level can rise. And particularly if it's not a fast flowing, if it's a rain-fed river, it's not a fast flowing river, then it accumulates a lot of sediments. And during the rainy season, because the river is now at, the bed is at a higher level, then it can go into flood more easily and cause damage. Another impact of economic growth is urbanization and tourism. Now, urbanization and tourism creates a problem of pollution. And I'm talking more about sewage disposal. You will see that in tourist towns along rivers, there is very often, there are pipes that just release raw sewage or channels that release raw sewage directly into the river without even treating them. And this is true of the Ganga also. Very often, even though there is a sewage treatment plant in Haridwar, very often the sewage treatment plant is not working and the sewage comes directly into the river untreated, even though we say that it is Ma Ganga and it is worshipped. Another problem in urban areas is that of encroachment. And more as the local population increases and the number of tourists increase, then you find more and more hotels in particular trying to attract more tourists by advertising riverbank hotel or riverside hotel. So you'll get a great river view. And this kind of construction begins to encroach on the river space. Of course, the rivers know how to take revenge very easily. So when it is in flood, it can even wash away large hotel buildings, as you may have seen in the last few weeks, has happened in places like Manali and Mandi on the banks of the Bias River in Himachal. Or you may recall the 2013 flood in Uttarakhand, when large number of riverside buildings just got wiped during the flood. A new exercise that has emerged is the concept of riverfront development. The idea is to convert the riverfront from the natural banks of the river into a recreation area, and therefore to build promenades or walkways all along the river edge. Sand mining. As the construction has picked up all over the country, there's a tremendous demand for sand. Now, rivers bring sand every year, particularly during the rainy season because of erosion. So it's okay if you want to remove that excess sand that has arrived during the year. But in our greed to extract as much sand as we can, today we are breaking all the rules. In fact, sand mining is governed by a mafia throughout the country. And as a result, the sand mining tends to use heavy machinery today, and which is illegal. And by doing that, it disturbs the bed level of the river. So suddenly you'll find that where the sand pits have been dug, there is a sudden change in the slope. The moment the slope changes, the water velocity will change, it will acquire greater speed. And as it acquires greater speed, it will get more erosive force. It will begin to then erode the banks of the river. Also, while doing the mining, what we are doing is we are disturbing the life forms in the river. Okay, so that's one. And I think I've covered everything I wanted to say. There's one special kind of river that I left out, which was the what are called, these are small mountain streams, but they are special because they are in the glacial zones of the Himalayas. They are also generally glacier fed, but Naveen Bhai will talk more about them, what happens to these rivers when they are in flood. Okay, I'll stop at this point.
Thank you, Ravi sir. Thank you so much to give these pointers, to start thinking about and even build a case when we are talking about Himalayan rivers, because when we are looking at rivers in general in the plains, we have a very different perception and understanding of river vis-a-vis looking at any mountain regions and rivers in the mountain region. And I think your stress on small streams really makes more logic or sense to people who work in the water sector, because small rivers confluence bring the big rivers. So Ganga is Ganga because there are thousands of small streams, and then each small stream is fed by even thousands of ponds and puddles, as we were mentioning. And if we want a healthy Ganga, for example, or a healthy river, we have to really, I usually use the word democratizing of the rivers. So we have to go back to looking at, decentralizing the water systems and looking at their well-being. You do talk about many roles of these water systems and also touch upon the urbanization aspect of it, especially talking about riverfront, talking about, how pollution is brought and stressing on the economic part of development, which we often talk about. I mean, unfortunately, development connotation is coming with the economic word itself, So we need to talk about some other vocabularies of development. But let me just invite Naveen sir with giving a brief introduction for all of our participants who are here, and then invite him to give his opening remarks. Dr. Naveen Juyal is one of the most accomplished names, as many of us know, in the field of paleoclimatic studies, geomorphology, and quaternary geology, and many more. He has contributed immensely in the fields of quaternary geology and paleo-environmental studies, and he's been a member of various committees, various reports, various advisory from time to time, addressing various issues concerned to modern development schemes, which are influenced, both positive and negative influence from environment, and particularly on water sector. And who's been one of the stars, I must say, who has contributed a lot to physical research lab also in our own city. So good to have you, even though we are in the same city, and I really look forward to also having more interaction physically as well. But today on this digital mode, I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much, sir, for giving us time. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Mansi, I will start from where Raviji left. The rivers in the Himalaya. In fact, when you talk about the water and water availability to the local people in the Himalaya, the Ganga, the Yamuna, these rivers, they don't feed the local people. It's a small river, they feed the people, because majority of the small rivers in the Himalaya are monsoon fed, that is groundwater fed. Some of them in the high altitude are snow melt or glacial melt fed rivers. So these small rivers are the lifeline of the people living in the Himalayan regions. I'm not talking about the Ladakh Himalaya. I'm not talking about the Spiti Himalaya, where the lifeline is the snow and the glaciers. Unfortunately, the same rivers are the rivers during the time of extreme weather event become the sorrow for the people living in the Himalaya. We have to also keep in mind now that IPCC's sixth assessment report, which was out in 2019, they are really worried about it, that the capping of 1.5 degree, which we are talking about, that we should maintain it in order to prevent the disaster to get amplified. It certainly is not going to happen. That is what the problem for the Himalaya is, because there is an added component in the Himalaya which we call elevation dependent warming. It's very unfortunate. Of course, it is not conclusively proved, but the elevation dependent warming means that compared to what you are getting the warming at the lower altitude, higher altitude is going to warm more. Why? One of the factors responsible for the warming is because we are melting the glaciers out in the higher elevation, say around 5,000 meters, you are exposing the rocks. And the moment you expose the rock, you are really reducing the albedo. When you reduce the albedo, more heat is being absorbed there, and which is going to have a negative feedback mechanism. And this is going to really create more flood-like situations in this particular area. Now, the two things I'm going to talk to you. One is the hydropower projects, how they are really impacting the Himalaya. And second, I'll talk about a little bit about the road. And in both this topic which I'm discussing with you, I was fortunate enough to work with Raviji as he was the chairman of those particular committee, and it was really kind of both of us we learned a lot in the process. The first thing is the hydropower project. Now we have now increasingly convinced that in the region which is in the higher it reaches, that means I'm talking about area like 2000 meter plus elevations upstream, we must not really gag the courses of the streams, allow them to free flow. We have been repeating, and the reason for that, why we are saying that the river should be allowed to flow freely, because these are not the river of the plains where during the extreme weather event, it's the fine sediment which are being transported and nothing happens and they get settled in the floodplain. We don't have the floodplains here. It's a confined rivers. So the moment you create a barrages, the sediment which it carries, that get entrapped. And when the sediment get entrapped, they act as a force amplifier, which we have seen in 2013. Majority of the area which got devastated along the Mandakini River was because of the half made barrages. They amplified it. 2021, we have seen if there were two barrages, one at the village called Reni, another was under construction Tapovan. If these barrages would not have been there would not have been any death. So similar in the Vishnu Prayag project, 2013 again, if that barrage would not have been there, nothing would have happened. And mind you, in 2013, we investigated that Vishnu Prayag hydropower project, and we were told that their radial gates were not able to open because the big boulder came from behind and they locked it up. Same story is being repeated now in Malana, in the Himachal Pradesh. We learned nothing. We learned nothing from the folly which we made during 2013. Ignoring everything, the construction of the hydropower project is going on unabated, both in the Himachal Pradesh and also in Uttarakhand. And this is really we are going to pay very dearly for this particular thing. Now, people may say that we are against the hydropower project. That is not, we are not against the hydropower project. We are against those projects which are unable to sustain the vagaries of nature. That is what is our concern. We want that this project should sustain, but then the question is how can we make them sustainable? And when the question of sustainability comes, we do not have any idea how the river behaves in an area which is recently vacated by the glaciers. I'm talking about, again, higher altitude, say from 2000 meter upstream. We have no idea what is the hydrodynamics of the river. We have no idea how much sediments that were left behind by the receding glacier is waiting for a trigger to really mobilize them. We have no idea. And we have also no idea what is the kind of discharge fluctuation as a function of seasonality. We don't have that particular data. So these are the things. That's why we are saying that please do not populate this area, allow them to flow freely, and more on it. We must know the science behind the hydrological system, sediment mobilization system in this area. This reminds me of a very good statement of Jayant Bandyopadhyay. He wrote in, I think, Economy Weekly long back. He said, Himalayan rivers not only carry the water and energy, they carry enormous amount of sediments. And this we have all ignored. That is first part. Second part, coming back to the road thing. Now, in the road, we have done a lot of permutation combination, lot of exercises with Raviji, myself, Hemant Dhyani. We really struggled and brought the science out of it. In fact, whatever I'm talking to you is all published stuff. We need a peer-reviewed scientific journal. I'm not talking, out of nothing. So we demonstrated that if you widen a road from certain width to go to a next higher width, what is the collateral damage the Himalaya is going to witness? Both in terms of slope instability, deforestation, and as Raviji has said, that the amount of sediment which are going to get generated and going to really impact the aquatic ecosystem in the rivers. We said that. We have also said that Himalaya, if you dug a road in the Himalaya, you cannot uniformly cut the roads using the same kind of technology, because in every kilometer, there is a change in the rock types, and you really have to pay for it. That's what we said. Third most important thing, we said that when you dug a road, you really cut the umbilical cord of the springs which recharge the villages if they happen to locate down the valley in the roads. They cut it down. We have no provision whatsoever to channelize the water during the construction of the road. We have no provision for the diversion canals that one need to really make on the crown of a sediment which you are cutting through. So this is what the folly we have made. Now, last point which I want to really put in front of you, that I was fortunate enough to, it's an unfortunate incident, but I was fortunate enough that visited the Beas River. I traveled through the Mandi to Manali area. I will tell you, there was the flooding people are talking about, it's a huge flood and things like that. I don't see that kind of thing happen there. It was not a flood which really overtopped the road. It was not a flood which brought the boulders on the road. It was merely a flood. Of course, it got force amplified, but it only did the erosion of the soft sediments. So that means our alignment of the road between Mandi to Manali was faulty. We should have raised the road level to an elevation, learning from 2013, which we have already written in our report to the Honorable Supreme Court, that Mandakini Road, when it was supposed to be reconstructed in the Char Dham Pariyojana, we said, please do not use the same alignment because it was completely destroyed, but they ignored it. And same thing, we paid for it. So the question is this, that where do we go from here? Water is a boon for the people in the Himalaya and also people in the downstream. But the moment we gag the flow of the water, the moment we poorly understand the hydrodynamics of the water in the Himalaya, the moment we have no idea about the kind of processes which are operating in the high altitude in terms of water mobility and things like that, we are in for the disaster. And this is going to get amplified. Thanks, Shubham. Thank you.
Mansi, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you so much, Naveen sir. It almost felt like you were speaking from the heart. And I think we all three of us resonate with these burning issues. And I must say that the crying issues of the rivers in the Himalayas, because many times when people are sitting and deciding in the capital, we really harmonize river, or I must say, we see all rivers as one way. And you really made an important aspect related to climate change. When we talk about climate change at 1.5 degrees on the plains, it means completely different thing. And in the hilly region, and talking about this, elevation dependent warming, which we are seeing, the glacial melting is a classic example of it. And bringing out these two major aspects of hydroelectric project and highway project, which we are often really obsessed with, I must say that the latter is more obsessed with tourism and economic development. And of course, to do that, the hydroelectric project is more on energy, because we can't do development without energy on our hands to work on it. But when you talk about these things, you also do touch about the impact of these on ecology. And I really like the analogy which you are using, cutting the umbilical cord when we really cut or dig for making roads, which we have seen. I mean, Dehradun I saw last year was really bleeding, and we are seeing now the new tunnel coming up in Rishikesh, Haridwar. It's almost like sitting on the river, and I should not use the word on these kind of official platforms like these, but it almost feels like degrading our. It's it's like I use the word for Neer and Nari, but it is really like intimidating these important ways. So somewhere the way we are treating women in the country, I feel like rivers are also treated in the same manner. So being a woman, I feel it that way more often. You do not make that point, but I'm just bringing it in. But when you talk about these rivers and also your experience on Beas River and other rivers around the country where you have worked on, you also talk about the role of small rivers, and very rightly put that small rivers are the lifeline of the rivers from where you started. And if we keep on pouring our money and development schemes on large rivers and ignore the small ones where livelihood and life matters, people who are in those scale of operations, they also feel less, about their own rivers and ponds, and they are also attracted to, more bigger aspects of the rivers and all. So it's again about, decentralizing or democratizing big rivers and bringing our focus back to the smaller ones where our lives matter. So let me have few questions, and then I will encourage all the participants also to pose their questions, ask or put it in the chat box. We have some wonderful fellows from the project, from CGAP, and also other participants are around. So please do write your questions on the chat box, and then we will take your voice also along with our speakers to interact with them. So my first question comes to Ravi sir, to you, on the matter of dam and whether we make dam or we break dam, because de-damming has started around the world, including India, and it started from the west, in part of Europe, Japan, where they are already talking about de-damming and all. So, yes, sir.
What's your question?
So I'm coming to that. So when we have already done the damage with development of dams, now we are going to the decommissioning of dams or de-development of dams, as I posed from Ashish Kothari's work. I am interested to learn from you how much more is going to be impacted on ecology, because decommission will also require a lot of work to be done, and energy and efforts and economics. What will be the impact on ecosystem on this? Because I was reading last week that US indigenous people are going to support the government to decommission some dams. And how are we seeing decommissioning of dams? Are we prepared for it?
Well, I must confess that I know very little about decommissioning of dams. It's a highly specialized field, and it's not really been done to the best of my knowledge. We have not decommissioned any dam over here.
Not in India.
Nature has decommissioned a few dams,
Yes.
particularly in your state. I remember back
Yes.
in the 70s when the Morbi Dam
Yes.
collapsed. Okay.
Yes.
So, but it's fairly simple to imagine what would happen. Let us say if you just open the gates and you let the water flow out. Not only will the water come, but along with the water will come all the sediments. Okay.
Yes.
When the sediment comes, it will just sit on the, first of all, immediately as the water flows out with the sediments, what is going to happen is that the water will be turbid. And that will be the turbidity will last for a while. And that turbidity will almost finish the penetration of sunlight into the river. And therefore, most of your small organisms, the microorganisms, which require the sunlight to propagate themselves and to make their own food, okay, they begin to die off immediately. Now, when the smaller organisms die off, then you begin to affect the entire food chain. Okay, so that's a very simple first principles understanding, and I would imagine that because that is such a huge change in the ecosystem of the river will take some time to recover and come to a new equilibrium state. Okay, so I will not say anything more than that. But I
Okay.
do want to add one aspect, that I think the era of dams in this world is over.
Yes, it
Ended in
is
the
over
last
now.
century.
Yes.
Why I say that is also because we are learning that there are new sources of energy which are less harmful at the present time, and they are cheaper. So people will naturally gravitate towards cheaper sources of energy, particularly if we are able to enable them, encourage them to move to those sources. I'm talking of solar, wind, etc., wherever we can. And in the case of motor vehicles, you may want to try out hydrogen also. Okay, I'll stop at this point to give chance for
I
other
have
questions.
I have another small question to you. Because you have worked multi-stakeholder groups, right from being part of the government missions in different projects across your career and work with the community of scientists and local communities as well. Where do you think that we have to really work a little bit more to convince people or all kinds of stakeholders that conservation also requires some kind of resources, as we see development as as a economic tool. Similarly, conservation also requires human resources, financial resources. Where do we really stand there, and how can we convince all kinds of stakeholders to invest in conservation vis-a-vis development? They are not conflicting to each other, but somehow the way development takes the front seat, I personally often feel that the conservation is suppressed. So do you see economy in conservation, or how can we convince that it is an economic approach as well, or take that step?
Much of my work has been done in environmental conservation, and that includes river conservation, reviving of springs, etc., as well as using water for livelihood purposes.
Yes.
Okay, through community mobilization. Now, I will not hesitate to say that the average modern economist knows next to nothing about environmental economics. It's not taught to them, and they live in cities. They have no idea of how nature works. I myself didn't have any idea until I started working in those areas, in the rural areas. So the greatest experience I've had in working on environmental conservation is that the returns on that investment are probably far greater than any kind of return in any kind of industry in the world. Okay, there is tremendous potential to maximize your investments by investing in nature. That I have no doubts about. And if anybody in this audience is interested, they can contact me and I can forward some literature to them.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe we have to learn youth, or all of us, more about the net present value of conservation efforts, because that has to come in. You have to monetize that and make it more popular amongst the practitioners.
More than net present value, you have to look at the rate of return of your
returns. Yes, IRR, the whole graph between the yes, the IRR graph has to be popularized. Very well said. So let me just turn to Naveen sir, and I will start from the point where you talk about elevation dependent warming. So when this whole climate change discourse is going on, we are not seeing Earth as a flat land and talking about climate change, and because the whole discourse starts from glacier melting at all altitudes. Do we have a different thermometer for mountain regions, and are there different guidelines now developed? Because it will be good to enlighten ourselves to understand that there is a barometer for plains, and there is a different matrix or different understanding, or we are having a different reference points for even for ocean for that matter. But to limit the conversation today here to mountain regions, are we seeing a different temperature for mountain regions?
There is
Go ahead.
Already there is a huge book which was published by Ministry of Earth Science, and that book in that book was, I think, edited by two of my friends. One is Dr. Sabine, and second is Dr. Krishnan. And Krishnan is now at the moment director, Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology, Pune. There they have said that if they have given a number that the rate of increase in the temperature compared to the plain is going to become 0.2 degree to 0.5 degree. So that is how the kind of temperature difference they are seeing. So there is a different kind of this thing. But see, I only gave you one reason, a possible
Yes.
reason that why it should be higher in the mountains compared to the plains, which I said that because of the glaciers are receding backward, that's why
Yes.
they're exposing the barren rock. And in the high altitude, you have got an enormous amount of solar radiation in the form of UV and other things. So they get very fast heated up. Once just for a small second, I'll just digress a little bit. There is a concept called the snowball Earth. Around something like 650 million years or so, people said that there was an entire globe was covered with ice, and then after that it got melted out. That is called, and that after the melting of the glacier, then the multicellular organism appeared on the planet Earth, and that we called Cambrian bloom in our language. How that happened? They said, well, you have covered the entire planet with the ice. So the albedo has gone very high. So that means that it is a kind of a cooling has to sustain. But they say no. There were volcanic eruptions going on, and then when the volcanic eruptions going on, they are pumping a lot of CO2 and sulfur dioxide, and they started exposing certain part of the rocks, and that particular rocks kept on absorbing the heat, and when the heat kept on absorbing, the whole thing got melted out. It's in a larger scale I'm talking about. In the Himalayan scale, this is one of the reasons. So we have got a different parameter. One thing. Second thing is that except the Karakoram, which is in the northwest Himalaya, all Himalayan glaciers, there is no doubt now that they are receding. They are going backward. So there is hydrologically speaking, there is going to become a peak discharge during the time when we don't require the water. And our dams are going to become empty, or we will not be able to accommodate that discharge when the monsoon sets in. So this is a kind of situation, this really stuck to me. Our dams are not designed to accommodate the pre-monsoonal water. Where are we going to go? And after that, the rivers are going to have a serious problem. So that is the answer to your first question. Indeed, there is a different parameter. There is a thermometer for the Himalaya.
So that brings me to the question which also you had raised. Please go ahead, sir. Please go ahead. Please add
something.
Yeah.
One of the reason, economics was one reason for why I said that the era of dams is over. The second reason is that with the changing climate situation, it's now fairly well accepted that extreme events will be far more frequent and far more intense. With time, their intensity will increase. Therefore, all our dams will become useless because they are designed for a different kind of hydrology. They are not designed for this new emerging hydrology, and this will naturally demolish
natural decommission.
As you said, the Himalayan region. Okay.
So natural decommissioning is the word which is very interesting for me to now, start dwelling into. So we don't have to wait for the policies. Nature will do its own for natural decommissioning. So in this process of natural decommissioning, Naveen sir, we are also observing, and in your opening speech, you also mentioned about these different ecosystems at multiple levels where we are digging. But we are also seeing that new streams are getting generated with these glaciers melting at, places which was not accounted in constructing the dams. And so when we are also, bringing new ecosystems, and already the old ecosystems are getting broken with all our development aspirations, do you see that nature is already doing its bit to restore the damage which we are making? Or are we going to be wiped out from the Himalayan regions? I'm just asking a naive question out of it. But jokes apart, how do you really see our understanding of new ecosystems being generated?
Well, when we talk about the evolution of a new ecosystem, it's a very long-term process. It's not a small process. So I'll call it it is a transient response. It's a transient response of anthropogenically modulating the existing ecosystem in the Himalaya. Now, if this is a transient response, then what Raviji said very correctly, that it's a system which is at the moment we are setting it into disequilibrium. How far the disequilibrium is going to persist? I don't think that's going to persist for a long time. I'll give you a small example. 1894, there was a major flood in the river called Birai River, a small tributary of the Alaknanda in Chamoli district. As a consequence, the entire 10-kilometer stretch of the river bed was filled with the sediment at an elevation up to 15 to 20 meters. That means entire channel was filled. Now, 2023, when I went there in order to make some estimates, I think the sediment which are left there is only, I think, 10 to 15%. So calculate the time, 1894 to 2023, more than 100 years or so, the major sediments have gone backward and river has again re-equilibrated with its own base level. So this is a transient response. That's why I'm telling you. But if this kind of perturbation with the climate change are going to sustain for a long time in the Himalaya, then what you are saying is correct. The ecosystem is not going to have a transient kind of behavior. Probably it is going to be permanently switched from one domain to another domain. That's what I can anticipate. But it's very speculative at the moment. Take it in that manner.
Yeah. So actually, they are there right now. We are hosting three kinds of ecosystem: the natural, which was there, the one which we are damaging through development, and the third, which is coming through the climate change impact, and they are coexisting in those mountain regions in these little water forms. And still the focus is on something which is not in the mountain regions, but which is on the plains, which is the river, which is the mega rivers which are flowing, all rivers from the north or even in the south for that matter. So let me just open the floor for all the participants to engage with you people, both of you. So any participant who would like to ask question can unmute themselves, but let me first invite my colleague and founder of W4W, Fawzia, to start the conversation so that all the participants also get warmed up to engage with you. Over to you, Fawzia.
Many thanks, Mansi. Thank you very much, Ravi sir and Naveen sir, for your very, very insightful discussions. I think I couldn't join from the beginning because I was in another meeting. And my question to Ravi sir first, and if Mansi has already discussed it, I'm very sorry if I'm repeating it. But I'm aware that you had resigned from the chairman of the Char Dham. Mansi is smiling, so I think it is. And that road was called Char Dham All-Purpose Weather Road. So all-weather road. So, and the chickens are already coming home to roost as we are seeing, devastation all over in that region. Also, last year I was in Dehradun for a particular event. And I realized that most of the rivers were there completely dry. I was there twice in July and September, and it was appalling to see the rivers completely dry there. So according to you, sir, this point onwards, because I still see a lot of promotion for tourism in, in the social media for the hills. So from this time forward, do you see any possible way of salvaging, or do you see that, or do you think that we are already doomed and there's no way to reverse the situation?
Well, there are a lot of issues covered by your question. First of all, don't talk of the Himalayan region in terms of hills. There are no hills in the Himalayas, there are only mountains, number one. Yeah. Number two, it is now consensus is building in the world that the tipping point is 1.5 degrees centigrade temperature rise above the industrial, pre-industrial age. Okay. Now, in the next 5 years, it is said that there will be at least 1 year when the average global temperature for the year will be in excess of a 1.5 degree centigrade rise, which means that we have entered into an era of accelerated climate change. What we saw in the last decade is also gone now. And you are seeing the extent of news that has just exploded on our television screens from around the world. Okay. So we are not prepared to cope with this. Now, one of the things that I'd like Naveen to say later, see, as far as Dehradun rivers are concerned, they have never had any water. Dehradun Valley is a gravel bed valley. Once the water reaches the valley, then it sinks very quickly into the ground. Okay, so for most of the year, the rivers remain dry, and unless you are talking of some mountain torrents, then immediately, like if I had all night rainfall 2 or 3 days ago, and I went out to look at some of the local rivers, I found that by the next afternoon, there was just a small stream flowing, but there were many locations on that walk along the river where I found that the side slopes had been very badly eroded. Okay, so what it means is that in the middle of the night there was a mountain torrent. It came, it tore apart parts of the mountain slopes, and during the day it looks like a fairly calmly flowing piece of water. Okay, so that's why don't get alarmed if you don't see many flowing rivers in Dehradun. But I'd like Naveen to talk a little bit about, see, glacier recession doesn't give us a very detailed picture. The detailed picture arises if I were to talk about glacial fragmentation, and that is a bigger danger. Over to Naveen.
Thank you very much, Ravi sir. I'll just add a little bit, Naveen sir, before you start to speak there. Because you would be speaking on the glacier, and I've been part of a group which often discusses about Himalayan glaciers. So I just wanted to understand here that black carbon is also like anthropogenic. Amongst the many anthropogenic activities that we're looking at, black carbon is also one of the reason, which perhaps affects the albedo, and hence, has been responsible for glacier melt. And then there are scientists who are trying these material. They're developing some kind of crystalline kind of, material which they think that they can spread over the glaciers, or they can do that, but they are so vast and huge, and they run across such long distance. Do you think, is there any way scientifically that we can now sort of check the receding or the melting of glaciers? One. Second is, the black carbon, is also, I was once discussing with somebody in Assam, and that person told me that, cooking on firewood is part of a culture. We use that, and the kind of food that we prepare perhaps tastes best when we use firewood. So that means changing the culture altogether if we want this to happen. So maybe a few reflection on that from your end would also be helpful.
Well, before I answer your question, because it's a very difficult question to answer, really give a one-to-one answer. But what Raviji asked, that biggest problem is the fragmentation of the glacier. Here I'm trying to advertise my channel, Naveen Juyal Whispering Himalaya. Please visit that particular channel of mine, which 3 days ago I put this particular video, Naveen Juyal Whispering Himalaya. There you will get a very shocking video of black carbon, how the people are burning the grasses at an altitude of 4,000 meters in order to melt the snow, so that the caterpillar fungus, which they call kida jadi, can come out. Anyway, so fragmentation, sir, is definitely a problem, and I have talked in that particular video of mine that why the fragmentation is happening. Now, fragmentation is happening to those glaciers which has got a length less than 5 kilometers. Bigger glacier never fragment. So therefore, when we talk about the number of glaciers in Himalaya, the number increase when we say it is the fragmentation. Don't get really happy when we say 9,000 plus glaciers. That means many glaciers are fragmented now, and they will disappear soon if the kind of warming continues, because the response time of a smaller glacier, less than 5 kilometers in length, has been defined. It's a definition for the glacier. They will go away. So that is first answer to your question. Of course, they are very sensitive. But here I will add on a small thing. The glacier length is not a climate sensitive length. I agree with Raviji. Raviji is my guru. He catches me always, and I cannot really pull a fast one in front of him. The glacier length, if I say 12 meters per year is receding, does not mean anything in terms of climate change. The most sensitive parameter to assess whether the glacier is responding to climate change is called the snow line or equilibrium line altitude. That is the line which is governed by the temperature sensitively. So people are not measuring that. They are all talking about 1962 Survey of India map. They take the map to the field, say snout was here. Now it is snout has gone there. The glacier has gone backward. So that is the kind of mistake we are making. But fragmentation, which you pointed out, is a more diagnostic parameter to begin with. Is the glacier change thing. The black carbon. The black carbon, if you read the report, which is submitted, I think, a week ago in the parliament by the the Standing Committee on the Water Resources, I think a week ago, page number 4, you will see they have identified black carbon as the major culprit for the glaciers in the Himalaya. Because of that, they admit that it is being receded. Not the parliamentarians are saying that, but the scientists who have fed them the report. So this is the fact now. Coming back to specifically to, I'm not talking about Assam, coming back to Uttarakhand, Himalaya, in our committee report, Raviji was sharing that committee on Char Dham, we said that be careful about the pilgrimage center, whether it is Badrinath, Gangotri, Yamunotri or Kedarnath. These are the close-ended valley. You pump 1 lakh people over there, what is going to happen? And behind this Char Dham is all the glaciers are located there. We are not concerned about it. There is a really worry. Everybody knows black carbon is creating a problem. No way you can reverse the process of glacial melting unless or until 2 things you curtail. 1 is the greenhouse emission. 2nd is the black carbon. And 3rd, important paper which has come out recently, which has been publicized by the Department of Science and Technology, they said that in Uttarakhand, the number of cloud burst incidences increased because of the forest fire. And for that, they said that whenever there is a forest fire, the black carbon source go to the atmosphere. It acts as a cloud, condenses the nuclide, and subsequently you get the more cloud. But of course, the observation is limited to a small area. This needs to be widened up, but this is the kind of things happening. And if the cloud burst increases, rain falls, rain on snow becomes another problem. That happened in 2013, June, in the month of June in Kedarnath. There was a lot of snow and the rain on snow that melts it out. So we are in for a trouble now. Recession, we cannot stop the recession until we curtail our black carbon and the greenhouse gases, or otherwise you have to create Norfel in all the valleys, the Norfel in the Leh area to create artificial glaciers. Thank you.
Thank you. So is there any question from any of the participants? I will also encourage CGAP fellows to really ask questions, even if those questions are naive, because these are learning procedures for all of you in your early careers. So any questions from the participants, or I take the last remarks from both our speakers? All young scholars and participants are encouraged to pose their questions. And those in the YouTube, you can also put your comment as questions and I can read them out for our speakers. Over to you, Jasmine.
Hello, it's been a pleasure listening to both the experts. I just was thinking about a thing that was mentioned earlier about illegal sand mining. And I wanted to know whether, we've been thinking about policies, a reverse maybe policy on tapping the final product that we're creating out of that sand and, standards around it to see whether from where has it been derived, so that we can actually stop the illegal sand mining. And also since there are a lot of other alternatives available today in the market. So I just wanted to know a little more about on the policy side of it.
भाई अभी तक जहां तक पॉलिसी की बात है, I don't see any policy that has worked effectively to control the over extraction of sand on most of our rivers, big, small, otherwise. What you have to realize is that sand mining is intimately linked to the electoral process. Okay, whether you are a panchayat or whether you are the Lok Sabha, the election process has become extremely expensive. Sand is called a minor mineral in our country. Okay, because it's a minor mineral, therefore it is also treated as something that is always there. Jitna marzi utha lo. There is very poor understanding of what is the role of sand in a river, okay, and how much sand we should extract. Though for the first time, some of the professors at IIT Kanpur have been saying that we now have a way of determining what is the annual accretion of sand at a particular location in a river. Okay, so according to them, it is possible to do scientific sand mining, right? But again, there are very few real alternatives to sand also. At policy level, people are talking of importing sand. Importing sand means अपने देश की समस्या किसी और देश को दे दो. There are efforts to recycle material that you get from broken down buildings and other structures. You can crush that material and you can get some concrete material, but not enough to replace the amount of sand that is required for current type of buildings. Now, the next step really needs to be taken by town planners and by architects. They are the ones who are capable of reshaping buildings so that they consume less sand. And I would say that town planning is very important because road construction today also uses a lot of sand. That's where substitution can be done. Okay? I don't,
Thank you.
Thank you, Gajendra.
Thank you, sir. Interesting point you raised, because I think development and mining go hand in hand, but you also add the political side of it. And I'm just blessed to share that actually I met Ravi sir first time with the work which is being carried out at Matli Sadan. So Guruji is there as a common link between both of us, and also from Matli Sadan Haridwar. So because you talked about architects and planners, we also have a fellow, CGAP fellow, Monica Tiwari, and she is architect and also working in sustainable part of it. So Monica, would you like to ask your question? Otherwise, I will wrap up the session. Okay, so I don't see she's having questions. So let me just then do the last formality of the session. Yes, Monica, do you want to go for it?
Good evening, speakers, and good evening, ma'am. I have a question that is related to kind of a man-nature relationship. Like unknowingly, we know that environmental activities such as construction of roads, dams, these are happening, and these developmental activities are unsustainable for global ecosystem. But we can't stop these activities. For the development of the nation, these activities are essential. So, like, what is needed for the environmental sustainability? That I would like to ask. Means we cannot stop these development. So, what should be done?
Classroom question. Classroom question. It's like how it should be done, and she's asking what it should be done. Over to you, Ravi sir. And it will be also your last closing remark.
No, yes. We don't have much of a choice left anymore. Pretty soon, nature is going to push us right against the wall. And when we have our backs against the wall and we realize that we have to change the way we live, at that stage, we will start doing the correct things. But in the meantime, humanity will have paid a huge price for that, for the delay. Now, I'll give you a very small and simple example why I disagree with you that it's not possible to reverse. See, for example, ever since I realized all this nonsense about, climate change and so on, sense and nonsense, I have become acutely aware of my own contribution to it. And I try in every aspect of my life to cut down on that energy consumption. Okay? On one side, and then I try and educate my own family. Ki bhaiya, don't just travel for the sake of traveling. क्या आप आसपास के जंगलों में जाओ, आसपास के पार्क्स में जाओ और वहां पे मजा उठाओ. लेकिन, I have a son who, with his family, wants to take a trip to some other country every 3 months. Okay, that's wrong. I'm quite happy to not fly out of the country even once in a year. Okay, so it is making, when more and more people will soon come to this understanding, because this is not going to be something unknown. Now, the other thing I want you to recognize, Monica, is that we are driven to consume. We don't need to consume. We are made to want to consume by advertising. Okay. I mean, have you ever, when you eat potato chips, have you ever looked at the amount of potatoes in that potato chip packet and how much you are actually paying per kilo? It's phenomenal compared to the price of potatoes. Okay. So you have to begin to really look at your own life. And I'm not saying that by each individual action, the world will change. No, that makes us passionate about the issue. That is the change. The change is within me. Okay. And then I push others. At the same time, I also try and push for policy, adopting correct policies. If I didn't have the passion, I would just be just like any other person. ठीक है, दुनिया ऐसी है. Thank you.
I think you really put it very well. Our own prisoner's dilemma, that we are into. Should I change or should I not? And changing myself in my room will also bring change in the boardroom. So Naveen sir, your closing remark, and then I take it further.
I think Raviji has already closed it, so I don't have anything to add on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. And it's been a privilege and honor for W4W Foundation as well as CGAP to really host you for this wonderful conversation. And as requested by me, to keep it as simple as possible for our, a layperson or citizen science, which we are trying to develop through W4W Foundation. We really thank you to be with us and enlighten us very briefly about these things, and then scholars or young people who are interested in these subjects, they can always dig into the matter in depth and also get in touch with you, because the kind of repository or knowledge bank we are creating at W4W is instrumental, and also I think it will keep motivating the younger generation because we are trying to make it more conversations around water. So let me just announce our next week and this week's session. So we invite you to the water arts of the Friday water session on August 25, when we are talking about edible art, fish with a long tail, both in terms of tail as in tail and tail in terms of story. And that will be done by Parag Tandel, and who is also hosting an exhibition at this moment in time in Mumbai. So those in Mumbai can also visit his exhibition. And the link to it is available on our website and also in the chat box here. In the next Wednesdays for water, we have rescheduled our Riverscape series session, and that's on August 30th, which was last week, and we could not hold it. So it's on Our River, Our Life, and we have two very young grassroots activists, researchers, scientists, I must say, who are going to come on our session, Niti Mahesh and Naren Srinivasan. And that will be hosted by ICOMOS Central Zone. And this Friday's Water Arts will be hosted by Living Waters Museum, led by Professor Sara Ahmed. So with this, we come to the end of the session. I thank all the participants who have joined us today and making these water conversations meaningful for us, and all the speakers who have spoken on our platforms, over 300 of them. And we are trying to compile all of them and their credentials on our maps, and also developing a bio book. Hopefully by the end of this year, we should be having them. Fauziya is here in charge of it. And we are also having more than, it's a gender balance of, I will say, platform. So nearly 50% of us are women speakers and practitioners in this stream. So I'm really grateful to all of you who have made these conversations really encouraging for all of us to create this knowledge bank. Thanks all of you. Please take care of yourself, and we see each other soon on another session, and goodbye.